I sit there and go, I can't believe she's gone. So for you, how are you handling this loss?
I'm just handling it. It's God's work. And
pouring in for legendary gospel singer Sissy Houston. The two-time Grammy winner and mother of Whitney Houston died yesterday in her New Jersey home at age 91.
Some houses are more than just places to live. They are witnesses to terrifying stories no one dares to tell. The abandoned house in Newark is one of those. Behind its tightly shut door lies the tear-soaked tragedy of Cissy Houston, a woman whose voice once moved the world, but who, in the end, was tormented by darkness and pain to the very core. That house doesn't just hold memories, it harbors deadly secrets, heart-wrenching final moments that take your breath away, and an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Her entire life was a race between willpower and a cruel fate, between radiant light and shadowy gloom. The story I'm about to tell will take you inside that house to hear the truth that has never been revealed. On September 30th, 1933, Emily Cissy Drinkard let out her first cry in the midst of the Great Depression, in a cramped little house in Newark, New Jersey. Outside, the wind whipped through old window panes, carrying the chilling sounds of the times. Inside, a poor black family struggled to get by in a rickety wooden house, where 8 children grew up amid the smell of kitchen smoke and endless sighs. In those days, Newark was a place where dreams quickly withered under the invisible blade of racism. Cissy's parents slaved away working for wealthy white families, washing, cleaning, scraping by for pennies. Yet, in that gray, bleak picture, music crept in like the first ray of light from the small church down the street. The gospel singing of her parents echoed back to their humble kitchen, nurturing the earliest emotions in Cissy's young heart. By the time she was 5, Cissy was standing in the church choir. Her voice was still hesitant but already impossible to ignore. It was as if, from that very moment, music had chosen her. But the joys of early childhood were quickly swept away by tragedy. In 1939, Cissy's father collapsed at the factory after a grueling day's work. His sudden death set off a chain of harsh days. Her mother, now alone, shouldered the burden of 8 children. Her hands grew calloused from cold water, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. In that setting, Cissy slowly lost her innocence, learning to care for her younger siblings, cook meager meals, and face a forced maturity long before her time. Poverty lingered on in silence. Then, in March 1945, another storm hit. Cissy's mother, the woman who had fought to keep the family from falling apart, suddenly collapsed from a stroke. Cissy, only 12, stood by her mother's bedside, witnessing her final moments. With no one left to lean on, she was forced to become an adult. The house fell into a heavy silence, devoid of laughter and warmth. Cissy struggled to provide meals, care for her siblings, and soothe the younger ones who still craved their mother's touch. Amid pain too deep to name, music was the only thing she could still cling to. Every weekend, she led her siblings to church, stood before the congregation, and sang not to perform, but as a sacred ritual to hold on to the fragile hope that remained. In the late 1940s, from that pain and faith, the Drinkard Singers were born. The family gospel group, formed by Cissy and her siblings, began performing at local churches. They had no grand stages, no hefty paychecks sometimes, just a hot meal. But for Cissy, it was where she rediscovered herself. Her voice, growing stronger, became a declaration against adversity. Still, life was full of challenges. Newark wasn't kind to black people, especially women. The rejections, the dismissals, the insults for her skin color hardened her soul. Yet, she didn't back down. On June 15, 1955, a major turning point came. In Cissy's adult life, she married Freddie Garland, a factory worker. The hope of a stable home gave her dreams of a steadier life. The birth of their son, Gary, later that year was a small spark in her dark days. But peace didn't last. Petty arguments over money and survival slowly eroded their bond. Just 2 years later, the marriage fell apart, leaving Cissy as a single mother. The 1950s weren't forgiving to divorced black women. Neighbors' judgmental stares and the community's isolation left her lonelier than ever. Still, Sissy didn't give up. She kept touring with the Drinkard Singers, taking Gary along on every trip, sometimes. The boy would fall asleep on church pews as his mother sang. Life was tough, but music lifted her up every time she felt like falling. The family gospel group, the Drinkard Singers, gained some recognition in the church community. But for Sissy, it wasn't enough. In April 1960, a sudden opportunity brought her to the Sweet Inspirations, a backup singing group looking for a powerful female voice. With her gospel strength, she was chosen instantly. But the road ahead wasn't smooth. Stepping into the professional music world meant entering a high-pressure grind. Sissy began backing major names, from Elvis Presley to Aretha Franklin. But no matter how tirelessly she sang, her name was never called out on stage. In July 1961, while recording with Elvis in Nashville, the feeling of being overshadowed clung to her like thick dust. As the audience roared for Elvis, she and her fellow singers got only polite glances. At best, racism wasn't hidden, it was blatant and persistent. White producers often asked her to tone it down, as if afraid her voice might outshine others. She saw it all, but stayed patient, believing her chance would come. On August 9, 1963, a glimmer of hope broke through the gloom. Whitney Houston was born, bringing new light to a house weighed down by worry. She was the result of Sissy's relationship with John Houston Jr., a man she'd met at a gospel performance years earlier. They married in May 1964, a simple but hopeful occasion. Yet, that happiness soon faced challenges. John, charming, smart, but secretive, wasn't a safe harbor. Rumors of his unexplained absences began to swirl. The weight of family grew heavier as Sissy juggled caring for Gary and Whitney while her schedule with the Sweet Inspirations stretched on endlessly. The Newark house slowly turned into a place of quiet tensions. Sissy came home from tours with sunken eyes, only to face a heavy atmosphere. John often blamed her for spending too much time on music, but she never fought back. She chose silence, holding her kids close to ease the growing unease. Even her career began to feel stifling. Though the Sweet Inspirations brought steady income, the backup role left her feeling trapped. In October 1965, while recording with Aretha Franklin, Sissy stood in the studio, keenly aware of the hierarchy in the looks and treatment she received. Aretha shone center stage, while Sissy, despite her equally powerful voice, was just a shadow. In 1966, an unexpected event stirred her heart. Dionne Warwick, her cousin who'd taken her first steps in music alongside Sissy, suddenly rose to stardom with a string of hit songs. Though proud, Sissy couldn't help feeling unsteady. Family gatherings lost their old warmth. Dionne's spotlight made Sissy feel faded. Even Dee Warwick, another cousin, was building her name. Tensions grew between them, with Dee's blunt disagreements over artistic choices widening the gap. In the home that once brought peace, Sissy now felt pushed to the edges, powerless to change it. In April 1967, the Sweet Inspirations signed with Atlantic Records, a big step forward. Sissy's voice rang out in hits like Van Morrison's Brown-Eyed Girl, but even in that success, she remained a faint background note. The music industry, controlled by white men, kept her in a supporting role. In November 1968, performing with Elvis in Las Vegas, the bright stage lights couldn't dispel her sense of emptiness. She stood there, knowing she could do more, but the doors stayed shut. Despite it all, Sissy kept the fire of music burning in her heart. She led the choir at New Hope Baptist Church with strict discipline, earning respect. It was her way of holding on to faith in a world that kept trying to drag her down. She taught Whitney to sing from the time she could toddle, seeing in her daughter's eyes a familiar spark, the same one she'd once carried. But even that joy wasn't free of cracks. John grew colder, often absent, and whispers of another woman spread, clinging to her faith. Sissy tried to forgive, but the wounds cut deeper. In the summer of 1969, Sissy welcomed her second son, Michael, a faint light in the darkening storm of her crumbling marriage. Though his birth brought brief warmth, it wasn't enough to save a relationship worn thin by disappointment and broken promises. John remained an unchanging shadow, while Sissy, balancing 3 kids and an increasingly tough life, felt trapped in an endless drama. In April 1970, the spotlight finally found Sissy at age 37. She stepped into the studio as a lead artist for the first time. Atlantic Records was where she bet everything on her debut solo album, presenting Cissy Houston. After years in the background, the voice that had lifted countless stars now sang for herself, surrounded by skeptical looks and lingering biases. Sissy didn't flinch. Her voice rang out powerfully, crashing against the studio walls like waves, proud yet heavy with suppressed pain. The album, released that summer, earned critical praise. They called her a gem of gospel and soul. But that recognition didn't translate to commercial success in an industry that favored familiar faces and entrenched biases. Her voice was drowned out by cold indifference. Her music career, once seen as a path to freedom, became a cage. Comparisons to Mahalia Jackson didn't open doors. They only deepened the sting of rejection for not fitting the market. In November 1971, when a producer's blunt dismissal reminded her that her race and gender were still barriers, Sissy nearly broke, but she refused to fall. Touring with the Sweet Inspirations, she buried her bitterness in every note, swallowing her disappointments whole. The music world grew more stifling. In May 1975, another wound cut deep. A choir member spread rumors that Sissy was too ambitious, willing to sacrifice family or even herself for her passion. The gossip spread like wildfire, leaving Sissy reeling. Instead of giving up, she kept teaching Whitney to sing, kept writing, kept living as if every note was a breath. Whitney, now 12, began showing a voice that stunned everyone, clear yet powerful. Sissy saw herself in her daughter's younger days, but also the dangers lying ahead. She knew too well that the music industry wasn't just a stage of lights, but a maze of traps, where not every dream was strong enough to survive. The old brick house in Newark, with its front porch overrun with wildflowers and a time-worn piano, remained Sissy's refuge when her heart wavered. She held choir rehearsals in the living room, turning her home into a cultural hub for the community. But even surrounded by music and faith, it couldn't shield her from heartbreak. In December 1976, after a trip away, John came home with a love letter still in his coat pocket. Sissy didn't bother confronting him. She kept caring for her kids, sticking to her rehearsal schedule. But deep down, she knew her marriage was nearing its end. Whitney began to sense it, clinging to her mother more, as if afraid of an unnamed loss. On March 15, 1983, Whitney signed with Arista Records, a milestone both mother and daughter had awaited. Sissy stood behind her, proud yet anxious. She'd seen too many talents swept away by fame's temptations and didn't want Whitney to be next. Sissy oversaw every detail of her daughter's career, from performance style to wardrobe. But that control, though born of love, strained their bond. Sissy felt the growing distance but couldn't stop. She poured all her faith into Whitney, not just for her daughter, but as a way to live out her own unfulfilled dreams. And that very choice began to erode the sacred closeness they once shared. In June 1984, a rumor shook Sissy's world. Robin Crawford, Whitney's closest friend, was rumored to have a relationship with her that crossed boundaries in a conservative community like Newark. The gossip spread like wildfire. Sissy, rooted in her deep Christian faith, felt lost and torn. She began to distance Whitney from Robin, caught between the two most important women in her life. Whitney pulled away from her mother. The house, once filled with song and laughter, fell silent. In August 1986, Whitney's debut album topped the charts, shining with the brilliance of a rising star. Sissy stood in the quiet shadows, both proud and pained. Her daughter had entered a world Sissy could no longer protect. The rumors about Robin Crawford kept creeping in, cutting like knives into an already weary heart. with her unyielding beliefs. Sissy felt the gap with her daughter widen as she urged Robin to stay away. She knew Whitney couldn't understand her fears, but she didn't regret it. By December 1987, another blow struck. John returned after 3 months of absence with empty apologies. For Sissy, the cracks in their marriage were beyond repair after over 20 years together. It was merely a chain. She considered ending it, but the church community's judgment held her back. To them, divorce wasn't just a personal failure, it was unforgivable. Finally, on February 14, 1991, after nearly 30 years, Sissy and John's marriage ended, holding the divorce papers. She felt like she'd walked out of a prison, but that freedom wasn't light. The scars of John's betrayal and lies never fully healed. Worse still, the church community that had been her rock turned its back. The whispers, the harsh looks, weighed on her like a stain she couldn't wash away, even though she, too, was a victim of their broken marriage. In August 1995, the family's spotlight dimmed again with a shocking blow. Whitney's public appearance, looking gaunt and weary, stunned the world. Rumors of drug use, once confined to shadows, exploded across headlines. Sissy saw her daughter's pain, but tormented herself, wondering where she'd gone wrong as a mother. Night after night, she prayed with her Christian faith, but it felt like no one was listening. Music became the only fragile thread holding her together in a bleak reality. In February 1996, a fleeting moment of glory broke through the darkness. Sissy won her first Grammy for Best Gospel Album, but that pride didn't last. In November 1997, another storm hit. A legal battle erupted over Whitney's music rights, pulling Sissy into the fray as someone who'd once managed parts of her daughter's career. She faced lawyers questioning her past decisions. Standing in court, she felt exposed under countless judging eyes. Rumors of greed and exploiting her daughter spread again in the community that once hailed her as an icon. Just months later, in February 1998, Sissy won her second Grammy for Best Gospel Album. The crowd applauded, but she felt hollow, no longer caring for this glory. Whitney, the daughter she loved most, was drowning in scandal and didn't even attend the ceremony. Sissy stood under the stage lights, soaked in loneliness and disappointment. By March 1999, things grew worse as Whitney's drug issues became public. The press tore into her mercilessly. And Sissy, though no longer her manager, was dragged in. Failed, Mother appeared in tabloids, a direct hit to her fragile faith. She stood silent before the family photo on the wall. Memories of Whitney, the girl whose angelic voice once captivated the world, were now just a shadow in scandal-filled headlines. The music dream she'd cherished turned into a nightmare, despite her efforts to save her daughter. Sissy watched helplessly as Whitney slid deeper into darkness. News about Whitney flooded the media, and Sissy's name was pulled in, as if she were the root of all the chaos. In March 2005, a faint hope flickered in the mother's eyes after multiple stumbles in rehab. Whitney resolved to start over. Sissy welcomed her back to the old Newark house, filled with memories. She cooked simple meals, sang old hymns with Whitney, trying to reclaim a shred of peace. Those brief moments felt like a return to carefree days, but the joy couldn't last. Whitney soon fell back into addiction, faster and darker than before. In August 2007, when Whitney reappeared publicly, the glamorous diva was gone. She looked worn, her voice faded, her eyes lost from the shadows. Sissy watched her daughter on stage, her heart breaking. For the first time, the mother felt her strength wasn't enough to hold on to her drifting child. On February 11, 2012, fate dealt Sissy a devastating blow. Whitney Houston, the daughter she poured all her love into, was found dead in a Beverly Hills hotel bathtub. The cause was drowning, compounded by drugs. When Sissy got the news, she flew to Los Angeles, facing her daughter's body, once home to an angelic voice, now a cold shell. At the casket, Sissy felt her soul slip away. Whitney's death became a media frenzy. Tabloids swarmed, seizing every image, every tear, turning her pain into sensational headlines. No one cared about a mother's shattered heart. In early 2013, Sissy published Remembering Whitney, hoping to portray her daughter truthfully and humanely. She wrote to restore Whitney's image not just as a star, but as a child who lived, hurt, and longed for love. But the public wasn't kind. Accusations of profiting from tragedy spread quickly. They called her greedy, a failed mother. Even the Newark community turned away, unwilling to understand. For 3 years after Whitney's death, Sissy was swept into lawsuits over her daughter's estate and music rights. Cold courtroom questions made her feel judged again. The press attacked relentlessly, blaming her for the family's tragedy. Even New Hope Baptist Church, where she'd led the choir, began to pull back. Whispers about her morals and responsibility weighed heavily on a woman who'd stood strong through countless storms. But the tragedy didn't end. In July 2015, Bobby Christina Brown Whitney's only daughter and Sissy's granddaughter died after 6 months in a coma. The cause, again, was drowning mixed with drugs, like a cruel echo of the past. Sissy, now in her twilight years, stood frozen by the hospital bed, watching her beloved granddaughter take her final breath. No more tears, only an endless void. Back in Newark, where Whitney and Bobby Christina's laughter once rang, it was now a graveyard of memories. For Sissy, the house was no longer a home, but a prison of past shadows. At the same time, Alzheimer's began quietly stealing her memories. In October 2010, when she couldn't recall names of old choir members, panic set in. The house was adapted for medical care. The moss-covered walls and wildflower-strewn porch, once alive with Whitney and Bobby Christina's childhood, now held only heavy silence. In the years that followed, Alzheimer's erased more of Sissy's memories. Familiar faces in the family photo on the wall became strangers, and Whitney's radiant smile faded into a blur. Her trembling hands tried to grasp fading memories, but her mind shut them out, leaving her alone in an invisible prison built by the disease. The house, though equipped with medical devices and brightly lit, couldn't hold back the encroaching darkness. When COVID-19 hit in March 2020, the house became an isolating fortress, cutting her off from the world. New Hope Baptist Church, where she'd led the choir with discipline and faith, now existed only in her mind. Sissy often sat by the old piano, her once nimble fingers now stiff, her soaring voice reduced to a frail whisper, like the final notes of a forgotten hymn. On a sunny afternoon in August 2021, in a rare lucid moment, she found an old notebook tucked deep in a drawer. Its pages held words she'd written for Whitney advice, lessons, hopes that once lit her soul. Sissy clutched the notebook, trying to hold on to a lost time, memories of caregiving, arguments, and the crushing moment she learned of Whitney's death flooded back. But then Alzheimer's swept in again, washing it all away. She sat motionless in the familiar room, her gaze vacant, unaware of why tears had just fallen. The Newark house became the final stop of a long journey. Nurses cared for her daily, trying to fill the void with kindness. But no one could reach the deepest parts where her memories melted away. In December 2022, when a neighbor mentioned Whitney, Sissy only smiled faintly. She no longer recognized her daughter's name, but a spark of the fierce woman she'd been still flickered in her clouded eyes. Newark's people looked back on her life with respect tinged with regret. They remembered her gospel voice ringing through the church, her strict but devoted mothering. But Sissy herself remembered nothing. Each afternoon, she sat on the porch, staring at the empty street, as if waiting for something forever gone. By May 2023, her health declined sharply. All activities were confined to her bed. Nurses recounted her past, but her eyes gazed blankly, as if it all belonged to another life. By March 2024, spring gently visited Newark, but it couldn't revive Sissy. Her body grew frail, lying still amid medical equipment. No one spoke of her role at New Hope Baptist anymore or recalled her strictness with the choir. Only occasionally, a hymn from the radio stirred her lips, a faint remnant of a life of devotion. Though Alzheimer's erased her memories, she remained the family's anchor. Pat Houston, her daughter-in-law, visited often, bringing warmth from the community and family. But Sissy no longer recognized her. On October 7, 2024, at 10:30 a.m., Sissy Houston passed quietly in her bedroom, with the breeze whispering through the window like a gentle farewell. Her family, Pat, Gary, Michael stood silently, witnessing the final moment of a woman who'd been the soul of a generation. The heart that endured countless losses finally rested. The Newark house, once alive with song and laughter, now held only a chilling stillness. News of Sissy Houston's passing spread like wildfire. Pat Houston, voice choked with emotion, issued a statement to the press. Within hours, headlines from Associated Press to People magazine flooded social media and newsstands. They called her a gospel icon, the woman who paved Whitney Houston's path to fame, the heart of New Hope Baptist Church. Meanwhile, her family, in a brief statement, asked for privacy amid the media storm. But the frenzy didn't stop. Posts on X and across platforms exploded with condolences. Many called her an angel, believing she was now reunited with Whitney and Bobby Christina in peace. In Newark, there was no loud spectacle like online. No crowds gathered before the old house. The community, with quiet respect, left it in the silence it deserved. The little Newark house, with its mossy brick walls and wildflower-covered porch, became a place of reflection for those who knew her. It wasn't just where she took her last breath. It was a symbol of memory, a place that once echoed with choir songs. A home Sissy turned into a spiritual fortress for generations. A week after her passing, fans quietly placed flowers on the doorstep, a tribute to a woman who lived for music and faith. The Houston family said nothing about the house's future. Some believed it would become a memorial, like homes of other great artists. Others thought the family would keep it as a sacred piece of their legacy. For now, its fate remains uncertain, standing silently, awaiting its destiny. A few caretakers, hired by the family, maintain it carefully until the day it no longer belongs to the Houstons. Sissy left behind more than a house full of memories. She left a legacy. Her gospel voice, resonating from church to studio, helped shape soul music and paved the way for countless Black artists. The youth inspirational choir at New Hope Baptist Church, which she led for over half a century, still sings a symphony extending from her heart. But her worth went beyond music. It was the journey of a resilient woman, raised in poverty, scarred by discrimination, and struck by too many losses: her father's early death, her mother's passing in childhood, then saying goodbye to Whitney and Bobby Christina. In the end, Alzheimer's stole her memories. Yet, no matter how cruel the world was, Sissy never backed down. She sang, she believed, and she stood strong, as if life could never break her. Her estate, estimated at a few $1 million, doesn't capture her true value. Sissy lived modestly, no mansions, no luxury cars, just the old Newark house holding every memory, every note, every step of a sacrificial life. Some of her wealth tied to Whitney's legacy, but past legal battles complicated things. Still, money never mattered to Sissy. She lived for art, for her children, and for an unshakable faith. When she closed her eyes, she left not just material wealth, but a story of sacred motherhood, of a soul that never surrendered. On December 15, 2024, New Hope Baptist Church held a memorial for her. Those she once led joined voices in her favorite hymns. Their singing, powerful and heartfelt, was like bringing her back to the stage one last time. Newark's people, though not crowding the streets, stood outside the church, quietly honoring the woman who made their city proud. The old house, with its wildflower porch, still stands a lasting marker of a life both tragic and triumphant. Sissy Houston, From her birth in 1933 to her passing in 2024, lived like a storm, fierce, enduring, and never defeated. Her legacy, though steeped in tears and tragedy, stands as undeniable proof of the power of music, faith, and a heart that always burned bright.